No one can love the country as much as I do, he wrote, for surely woods, trees, and rocks produce the echo that man desires to hear. And the fact that Beethoven composed his exquisite Sixth Symphony essentially in tandem with the dark, dramatic Fifth only increases its profoundly joyous, exalted quality. And as I revisited this work, having known it since 1962, something very important and obvious became apparent, and it has to do with the crucial element of harmony. Having just left the mighty Fifth Symphony, where once again we heard Beethoven's frequent use of the fundamental tonic and dominant chords, now we're going to add another chord. And once again, these chords are identified not only by name or term, like tonic and dominant, but also for easy reference by number. So the tonic chord is 1 because it's built on the first note of the scale. Say in C major, there's 1, and there's your home key. That's the 1 chord. The dominant note, G, is the 5 chord because G is the 5th note up from C. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your G. There's your 5 chord. So the continual repetition of these two chords in musicians' lingo is referred to as the 1-5-1 progression. So let's add another basic chord now to complete the holy trinity of harmony. It's the 4 chord, and it's built on the 4th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3. There it is. You know. 1, 2, 3, 1. 4, 3, 2. Yes. And the 4 chord is called the subdominant because it's 1 note lower than the dominant. So here in C major, here's the 1 chord, the tonic. Here's G major, the dominant, the 5 chord. And here's F major, the subdominant, the 4 chord. Life is just so much better with the subdominant chord. Boom, boom, etc. And that great spot in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony in the second movement near the end where the strings were always playing. Remember, and I made a big deal about this, how the last time Beethoven does, and it really blossoms. That's the subdominant chord. With lots of appoggiaturas on top. That's why that passage is so glorious. And speaking of popular, inspiring music of mid-18th century England, were we? Well, at any rate, you would never want to hear the Hallelujah chorus harmonized like this. Right? No. That's the 5 chord, the dominant chord. It must have the subdominant chord. There it is. My goodness. In fact, the traditional Amen at the end of hymns consists of 2 chords. The subdominant chord and the tonic chord. So, getting back to F major, the key of Beethoven's Sixth, you see how we circle around here and get back to our main work, we would have Amen, subdominant, the 4 chord, and 1. And the softening effect of the subdominant chord is present in a major way in Beethoven's Sixth.
What a way to begin with this contrast from the Fifth Symphony that we just did an amazing 11-part documentary commentary on.
Isn't that interesting? I don't know, Chris, if you've ever experienced it yourself. Sometimes, let's say I listen to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. As I'm listening, I definitely feel and think that's the absolutely greatest masterpiece in the world, right? And then the Sixth Symphony starts sounding, and I go like, oh, no, wait a minute. This is the absolutely greatest masterpiece. Have you ever had an effect like that?
Yeah, it truly is. I mean, especially when you have this many amazing, great compositions of Beethoven's. just even symphonically, you just feel like, oh no. And what about the Eroica? What about the Ninth Symphony? What about the other ones in between?
Oh, don't even
And-
get me confused. I'm going to fall in love
Yeah.
with every one of them all over. And
Well, thank goodness we have a lot more symphony and documentaries narrated by Larry for us to explore. I'd like to
absolutely.
start with this exploration of the subdominant, which he talks a lot about, this sort of new accord that he didn't talk about as much within the Fifth Symphony, that offers a kind of reverent beginning to this symphony, and then it kind of builds in excitement. It goes along very much with our theme and our backgrounds. Our viewers have noticed that we are using more pastoral, foresty, more natural backgrounds. What is your feeling when this movement starts, Dr. Anna?
Yeah, exactly. Getting away from the Industrial Revolution. Okay, we're 100 years forward in another Industrial Revolution. Now
Yeah.
we're going away from it into the forest. Now that forest is not even real. It's a background on our screens. So I just thought this was kind of funny and ironic how back then Beethoven felt the need to dedicate an entire huge monumental symphony to that theme, and I resonate with it absolutely tremendously. I love nature, and thank you, Beethoven, for pointing out that musicians can love things more than just music. And it's still okay.
Yeah, I think it definitely was one of, I mean, if you think about Strauss's Alpine Symphony and how that conjures the image of mountains, or great ranges of mountains and hikes, and, you know, the snow-capped tops of these big monumental kind of mountains out there, then this is sort of like the genesis of everything, where everything seems to like, oh, let's use the symphony orchestra to give the audience a image of nature, of different things that to explore. And you can really hear it once you can hear the brooks running, you can hear sort of the excitement of the animals and all that. I think this is our first glimpse into programmatic music.
And this theme contained two prominent cells. Yes, there it is, another four-note motif from Beethoven at this period. Along with this. And a moment later, this variant of it. I will call this the motive, da-da-da-da. And this motive, with its two fleeting 16th notes, ba-da-dee, da-da-da, it essentially becomes the of this first movement, since Beethoven derives so much of his material from this. And already in the very first measure of the symphony, even though there's very little harmony to accompany the theme, there is a clear implication of the subdominant, the four chord, in this. And as the theme continues, the violas provide more harmony, which confirms the subdominant feel. And now the strings all align vertically in a distinctly hymn-like phrase. There it is, the four chord, the subdominant chord. So, in the first 15 measures of the symphony, the beauty and the joy of the countryside is definitely, but subtly, shaded with a sense of reverence by the use of these hymn-like progressions. And immediately, the motive takes over completely, and the motive is repeated 10 times. Count them. And the many repetitions of the motive have led to that jolly oboe melody, which is our main theme from the opening. With the open fifth now very active in the cello. But I can't go on now without mentioning that persistent use of the motive, which repeatedly leads us to the dominant C major, which repeats 10 times unchanged. The bassoons add in for one bar, the motive crescendos, and then it fades. It's a striking way to build a motive into a larger section of the overall structure, repeating it 10 times. In any case, we now hear the hearty main theme played by the full orchestra in its full extended version.
We went through learning all of the symphonies in the class, and it was just really joyful. I had fantastic lecturers and professors in there. All of this was absolutely fun until it came to time to prepare for an exam. When you had to give back and prove what you learned. And I remember the Sixth Symphony being something of an outcast from piles and piles of piano versions of symphonies and operas and whatnot. Back then, we had to learn it by hand, basically. We had to learn the music by hand by playing the piano reductions of all the operas and symphonies. So, and going through Bruckner's symphony, have you tried that?
No, not at all.
Richard Strauss, when you're like a ninth grader. My sight reading skills had improved like never before through the preparation to that exam. And then when it came to Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, and I opened the piano score anticipating another humongous burden, and it's so easy to sight read.
Yeah, it's very light. Yeah,
it's so light. And the texture is so transparent. And back then, not every piano version was even available. So sometimes we had to take a full score and sight read that. And I remember for this particular symphony, we didn't have a piano version, so there was only orchestral version. And by then I've read tons and tons of them, and they were excruciatingly painful to read. So, and then I opened the Sixth Symphony, and I can actually enjoy it from the very first sight. It's so structurally sound, predictable, and clear. Unbelievable. So my first falling in love with the Sixth Symphony was falling in love with the
relief.
And how it flows, and I can sight read it.
Yeah.
And Beethoven's development section continues with standalone repetitions of the motive. And then higher, then, and he extracts then, as he often does, just two notes. Naturlaut, as Mahler would say, sounds of nature, calling, answering. Maybe it's a cuckoo. Two things about the passage we've just heard. First, the construction, the architecture of the music creates this magnificent expanse with mostly literal repeats. And at a precise moment in its progress through time, it changes to, and it continues to amplify in volume and breadth of sound. And we think of Beethoven's verbal description, the heading of this first movement. Cheerful impressions upon arriving in the countryside. Mehr Ausdruck der Empfindungen, he added, more expression of feeling than of painting. So it's not a direct description of anything, but it's an exalted emotional vista that's captured in sound. And second, and I know I'm repeating myself, but Beethoven's technique of motivic, organic development of his themes, the way he can extract a few notes from the theme and then spin them out, creating new variants that evolve into new shapes that are used to build new sections of the overall structure. This technique absolutely parallels the process of growth and development in nature, the patterns by which living organisms expand. Usually it's quite intricate, but here it's a precisely determined number of repetitions of a single motive that gradually expands into this magnificent arch. And the best part of all of this is that this entire passage will now repeat in G major. And an even more magical shift at that same point now into radiant E major.
Larry really is great at allowing you a little peek, preview of what's coming, and then satisfying your curiosity. And that's what the great lecture is, igniting the curiosity, igniting the audience's desire to learn more, to find out more. I'm really curious. I don't remember what Beethoven said about that.
Yeah, it's really incredible what Larry highlights in sort of the themes that we introduced the themes, but just like when we were talking about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, you can see how little segments of themes, little kind of motifs build into something more important, and also that use of the cuckoo, the descending fourth, the descending perfect fourths, representing nature, representing maybe raindrops and things. What a contrast to what Beethoven 5 was, when we had this sort of fate knocking on the door all the time, symbolizing something metaphysically different, but now it's something so close to earth.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Beethoven was known to be great admirer of nature and enjoying the nature and the sounds of nature. In one of his complaints was his bitter complaint that as his problems with hearing were developing, he could no longer hear in detail all the sounds of nature. And many composers, not only Beethoven, worked really hard on portraying the nature in their works. But to me, at least, Beethoven's way of portraying it is profoundly different from many other composers who just maybe took the sounds of nature and tried to imitate it by using man-made instruments, which is great. Flutes and clarinets and violins and all those instruments, they can imitate, even piano can imitate lots of nature sounds. But with Beethoven's incredible structural approach to development, he's so much about development. To me, his is more or less like, I would say, 180 degrees opposite approach. Instead of just bringing in the sounds which remind us of particular sounds of nature, I think what he is communicating is how we respond to those sounds of nature, how we respond to being, basically portraying our very intimate relationship with the nature, and how it's interconnected with our emotions, because his music doesn't really just make the trills of birds in the air. That's not the way he writes it. And Larry is really bringing out the inner mechanics, the inner workings of Beethoven's developing those and moving those sounds which reminiscent of the nature, but they have, to me at least, he is bringing out much deeper connections in there.
And there, that brief hymn-like progression in A major. And now the development continues using this hymn phrase, but now in G minor. It moves into a brilliant C major. Then back to F major, the tonic key, but with a major arrival point on the subdominant B flat major, like so. Second violins, violas, cello. There's a delicate cadenza now for the first violins in the dominant of C major. And the music flows now without fanfare into the recapitulation, one of the loveliest passages in the entire work. And it features that triplet figuration that we heard from the development section in the low strings. That thing now returns, but it's in the first violins, and it's over the main theme, like so. And this obligato is as gentle as it is expressive until it begins to intensify and build momentum as duple rhythm, the motive, and triple rhythm now combine and lead us back to our joyous main theme. Here is the entire passage.
I really also quite like the way he ends this journey. You know, he uses this shimmering pastoral vision. That Larry describes it as, and what that does is it really gives you an idea that perhaps you're by the seaside or by a lake, just as the video is highlighting. You know, I think what's amazing about the engineers and the design editors behind this is that they really show you the kind of visions that would really aid in exactly what Beethoven is trying to portray. And he uses this sort of tranquil, like, closing theme and builds and builds and builds using triplets against the 16ths. And what that does is that you feel like things are kind of really moving like clouds, because they're not really evenly. They they grow and fester in a different way than what you would imagine kind of orderly.
Yeah, and the beauty of seemingly chaotic relations between the rhythms, because they sound off balance and confusing when you have the duplets against triplets, especially for the stretch of the time as Beethoven uses it. Throws you off balance, but just like the nature does, just like the life does. And that creates that very organic experience listening to that music. And I'm glad you also pointed out the correlation between the visuals, the way our team created them, following the narrative of Lawrence Rapchak, and these videos are, to me, also an excellent lesson in English language, because the way Lawrence uses the adjectives, like, don't pile up too many adjectives. He doesn't. It's also with a great touch of class, shimmering pastoral vision. You read it in the best quality novels, this kind of communication, this kind of language. It's just beautiful, flowing, the way Larry's narrating the story.
And the recapitulation follows the events of the exposition, now all in the tonic F major. And just as before, the music will die away with nature sounds and the motive in the cello. And again, we have the same brief interlude that led to the development section. Built on this F7 chord, a sure sign that we're headed for the key of B flat major, just as we heard in the development. But now, change of plans. An unexpected or robust statement of the main theme by the full string section and French horns. And decisively in the key of B flat major, the subdominant key, another great moment in this symphony. And now we've emerged into a shimmery pastoral vision. That's our closing theme, formerly very vigorous. But now the rhythm of the motive, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, is much more tranquil and relaxed. With a background of strings in octaves And this closing theme in B flat major now crescendos into a glorious, expansive passage, almost hymn-like in its grandeur, and in the tonic F major. It subsides, and the motive now returns, but very lively. Beethoven, always searching for new ways of using the cells of his themes. He takes the motive, and he gives us a mini concert by a two-man peasant band, with this new rhythm based on the motive. It's just the clarinet and bassoon, complete with peasant piping by the clarinet. And another famous orchestral audition excerpt is born, the clarinet passage. And the tranquility now, the silence, the majesty of nature reigns as the main theme is extended upward into the celestial blue, as it were. The flute, the clarinet and bassoon, and this upward scale, it's a slightly simplified version of the motive that we heard before. But now, and it clearly outlines the subdominant tonality, B flat major, which in my opinion continues to highlight the hymn-like character of this music, especially in light of Beethoven's own words.